Hey, Katelyn.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good.
Thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks for asking me. Yeah, it'll be fun.
I think I shared my screen, so hopefully you're able to do that on
Okay,
the
let's
screen if you
see.
want.
Let's be better.
Got it.
Okay, good. Um,
We'll likely have a last minute crowd. I feel like
oh, okay.
we'll usually log on like right at 11:30. So
Yeah. I didn't know if it's a little early, if usually if you do them at noon. I was trying to remember, but
it depends. Honestly, if we do them earlier, we get more of the courthouse crowd.
no.
If we do them later, we get more of the health department crowd. So I'm not, and this being
Oh,
virtual only,
yeah.
I'm not sure what to
Maybe
expect.
people
So
be a little more flexible with it just on their computer. Yeah,
yeah, maybe.
yeah. You're doing one a month still?
No, we do one a quarter.
Oh,
We just cut back just because it was getting, just
it's a lot.
personally, it was getting to be too much just for me to try to coordinate all the time. And
Yeah, it's a lot of
so
topics. Yeah.
yeah, we dropped it down to just once a quarter.
Okay. Okay. How's Cole doing?
Not bad. I'm quite surprised. He had a surgery yesterday, and that, like, yesterday he was pretty good. Like, he wants to eat a lot, and I was like, "Hey, buddy, you can't." Like, they told me you can't eat.
Oh, just
Um,
like purees or
so yeah, so a lot of Jello and pudding and popsicles, juice, but he
how
wants
much
to eat
that
like
kid love?
yeah, he wants a sandwich, and I was like, I don't think we can have a sandwich yet, but maybe in a couple
Oh,
days. So maybe we'll try noodles today or something. But
no.
yeah, I'm like, what is something that will fill him up that is like
Right.
super soft and liquidy and like broth
Like
is
higher fat or like a
yeah.
protein shake or something with
Well,
some
that's I
fat.
tried to make him one last night, and he's like, I don't really want that, and I was like,
No.
okay.
Oh. Oh.
So, anyways, yeah, and then I was like, how about just like a bunch of I just did like chocolate ice cream with protein powder too, hoping he'd drink that, and
Yeah.
he didn't want that either. So,
Really? Oh, that'd
yeah.
be a treat.
But
Yeah.
yeah, he wants a sandwich and chips. And I was like, well, I know for sure you can't have chips for a couple days. So
Right. Oh,
keep
that's hard.
thinking.
You want to like
So,
make them feel better through food and you can't.
yeah. So no,
No.
otherwise he's like been playing well.
Good.
We've just been making sure we stay on top of the meds and
Yeah.
don't forget a dose of that. But
Was it
otherwise,
Monday?
he had it yesterday morning.
Oh,
Yeah. They said actually day like 7 is the worst, 7 and 8, because that's when like the scabs fall off in the back of the throat and that's when it's the most painful. Um,
wow. They put you under for that?
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
assume so. Okay.
So
Where do you
yeah,
go for that?
he was pretty brave. I was surprised.
Yeah.
He got a little anxious towards the end, but he walked back with them by himself and
Wow.
yeah. So
Is it at the dental office or like hospital? I don't know.
they at the hospitals, well, surgery
Oh,
center, I guess, right next to the
okay.
hospital.
Wow. I don't know if Jude could do that walk back without, I mean, he probably would just be really scared.
Yeah, yeah. But
Oh gosh. Poor thing.
he did it. luckily we've been reading this Sesame Street Hospital book since he was like a baby. It's like one of their favorites, and Grover happened to have got his tonsils out in the book, so we've been walking through this process for 5 years now.
Yeah,
So
right. Did you get, are yours out? Or
no, I don't. All my sisters did, and Luke and his sister have all had theirs
oh,
out. I wish I would have, because they
really?
caused me a lot of trouble in adulthood. But
Oh, I've
um,
never had any issues with them. It's just interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But my sister had hers out, Caitlin, when she was 30, and she said it was the most painful thing she'd ever had done as an adult. Um,
Is
she
this
said she,
pre-childbirth or?
yeah, I don't know. Well, I've heard that in adulthood it is very painful.
Hmm.
But Caitlin always says if she had to do it again, she would rather choose death than tonsillectomy.
Oh my.
Yeah,
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I mean, it's pretty bad, but
yeah.
she's funny.
So I'll just live with my problems, I guess. But
Yeah, I guess since
so when we
you're,
had the choice for Cole to get him out, I was like, yeah, because
yep,
if he's going to need it later on in life, it's going to be worse,
right,
it
better
sounds like.
now.
So
Yeah. Well,
so far, so good.
made it through it.
Yep. All right. I'm going to give it 1 minute in case we have a couple that pop on right at the end.
Okay.
Um, I know we'll have some tricklers that come in as you're already going, but just keep moving along.
Okay. And then, yeah, if I get done any early, I mean, I just have a call at 12:15, so
Yeah,
just like
no,
12:10,
I told
I could
everyone we try
answer.
to be done right at noon. So,
I can answer any questions until a few minutes after too. So yeah, if there are any.
okay, we got a pretty big group going. So I will let you get started, and then I'll just keep admitting people. So, I'll just do a quick introduction for everyone that's online. Katelyn Nicholson is joining us this afternoon. Well, this morning, I guess we're still in. Um, some of you may recognize her as a familiar face. She used to be one of our dietitians at the health department. So we're excited because she brought a lot of wealth of information, and hopefully she can share some more with us today. So I will turn it over to you, Caitlin. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So obviously, yeah, my name's Katelyn. Currently I just, I guess, host a virtual practice. Just got an office space actually in Clear Lake, north of the surf here. So I can meet in person, but predominantly just doing video conferencing and phone calls with clients. Briefly just say I specialize mainly in what I call the ODE axis, so ovarian, adrenal, and thyroid health issues and how nutrition impacts those hormone levels and a lot of gut issues, which we'll be talking about one level of that today, and just a lot of chronic inflammatory issues and of course weight management. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about gut health, specifically more food intolerances. Don't need to get too lengthy here, but yeah, with the gut, it kind of gets really confusing for people. you know, there's food sensitivities and food intolerances and food allergies, I guess, to put it plainly. And so today we're gonna be focusing more on the food intolerances, which is more like maldigestion of usually carbohydrates, different starches and sugars, when bacteria and candida, fungi ferment those in our gut, we get those IBS symptoms of gas, reflux, bloating, or, you know, diarrhea, constipation. Whereas like a food sensitivity is more leaky gut, and then we have like undigested food proteins slipping through and triggering like this immune response and causing like chronic headaches and skin, you know, reactions and all sorts of more widespread systemic issues. And then like food allergies, you know, like celiac, more like somewhat a genetic component to that. So don't need to go down those rabbit holes, but just wanted to kind of lay that out first. So today it'll be more like IBS related issues, more like a food intolerance discussion. So why is gut health important? I mean, many reasons. A lot of you probably heard they're referred to as like the main regulator of our immune system. A lot of statistics say like 85–90% of our immune system is controlled by our gut. So that's a huge role it plays. Obviously, it digests our food, and then it gets into our bloodstream, and then we metabolize it on like a molecular level. So obviously digestion, really controlling and help balancing our immune response systemically. So really want to help control that through what we're putting down, you know, down our digestive tract with what we choose to eat. And then I just have here an imbalance of unhealthy and unhealthy microbes is what is called dysbiosis, if you've heard that term. And they're connecting it now to weight gain and high blood sugar, cholesterol issues, and all sorts of other disorders, a lot of autoimmune conditions, and I'll mention that later. They're connecting to like an inflamed gut or leaky gut. So these are well known. I'm sure I don't need to tell you these. So symptoms of irritable bowel or syndrome or IBS. So, you know, you got your cramping, abdominal pain sometimes, gas, pressure, bloating, irregular bowel movements, nausea, and reflux are the most common. And then I'm just a visual person, so I wanted to put this picture here, and I actually have it in a couple of slides just to kind of remind people and come back to it. But in our gut, if you took any level of like anatomy and physiology, you maybe somewhat recall seeing these villi, and then these finger-like projections on the villi are called microvilli. And so we have this huge absorptive space in our gut because it wraps around like all these finger-like projections. And so I've read, if you'd stretch out, which is kind of disgusting, but if you'd stretch out your, you know, all the surface area around those finger-like projections, it'd reach the length of a football field. So it's just really nuts. So you can see on the left-hand side, normal mucosal cells and the tight junctions. They should be tightly packed like that. And then if we have chronic, even stress, or like we're sensitive to gluten or casein or whey or, you know, egg protein or something, or if we have dysbiosis, it can cause like inflammation and gap junctions, as they're called, over here on the red inflamed side. And that's kind of called like the leaky gut, and have undigested food proteins and pathogens and different toxins, maybe through our food supply, slipping through into our systemic circulation and cause a lot of autoimmune things to get triggered. So if you've heard of leaky gut, that's kind of what you can envision, or what I envision when I talk about it. It's kind of the separation of these mucosal cells, and then undigested things like gluten, undigested proteins can slip through before they're fully digested. And then your body's like, whoa, this is a foreign invader pathogen, and it triggers this immune response. So what causes leaky gut? I mean, I kind of alluded to this. So it could be dysbiosis. So, and I'm going to show a sample stool test that I typically run when people have gut issues, and that will hopefully bring some more clarity too. But it will show like if you have really high or low levels of different microbes in your gut. So dysbiosis is a leading cause of IBS symptoms, or leaky gut syndrome, excuse me. It means an imbalance, yes, between harmful and helpful species within the gut. So what can lead to leaky gut, poor diet, highly processed diet, more inflammatory ingredients, just try to get back to the more whole food space diet, anti-nutrients found in unsprouted grains. So just grains in general are better digested if they're like a sprouted bread or something. If they're soaked, they release what are called like phytates and lectins, which like if you kind of follow a paleo diet, they talk a lot about this, can be irritating to the gut. And they can also bind like calcium and other minerals and kind of prevent proper absorption. So if you eat grain products, I'm not perfect. I'm not going to act like I am, but trying to do sprouted grain products is usually better tolerated by the gut. Sugar, genetically modified foods are connecting to leaky gut, and just inflammatory food, just dyes and a lot of sugar, corn syrup, just all sorts of ingredients can be inflammatory. So common forms of dysbiosis. So again, that's the imbalance, like high and low levels of microbes in our gut. So today I'm going to focus mainly on SIBO. So if you've heard that, it refers to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And so as it says, that's an abnormal increase in overall bacterial population in the small intestine, and definitely going to dig into different things that can lead to SIBO specifically. And the reason I'm going to emphasize and focus mainly on SIBO is because it accounts for about 80% of IBS cases, research has shown. Another common one I'll see is high yeast count and candida. So that's an overgrowth of fungal organisms, specifically Candida albicans. And that one, symptoms of that could be like oral thrush, like a white coating on the tongue, or itchy inner ears, eczema, yeast infections for women. It just, that candida, it can actually puncture your intestinal lining and travel to different areas in the body. And so it just kind of depends where it travels to, what symptoms it causes. So yeah, here's the slide. I just said, like I said, there'd be another upcoming slide. Just wanted to reiterate, kind of give you that visual quickly one more time of what a leaky gut could look like. Okay, so really delving in here for the remainder of the slides into like, again, what leads to SIBO, because that's the most common cause of IBS issues for people. So I'm just briefly listing them here, and then the following slides will specifically address each one. So I'm not gonna get too in depth on this slide, but scar tissue from like C-sections, or I've had some clients who have had like gastric bypass surgeries, any type of abdominal surgery. Sometimes it leaves scar tissue, and like bacteria can build up around that scar tissue and not move along like it should and get swept out of the body. Definitely we want bacteria in there, but not too high of levels, so they can, it's kind of like, and when you talk about bacteria, like darker enclosed high moisture spaces, they just can really multiply rapidly. So when there's these bulges of scar tissue, they can really kind of build up around those. Low stomach acidity, altered like bile flow and enzyme production. So bile's produced in a lot of you probably know this, produced in our liver, stored in our gallbladder, and it helps break up fats coming in through the diet into smaller molecules to be absorbed. So just like, I'll just say lower digestive capacity for that one. Just things are going to be getting broken down properly, and they'll sit there longer and be able to be fermented more easily. Stress, and again, all of these I'll get into more, like how migrating motor complex dysfunction, it's like the wave like movement of those finger-like projections that move food debris along, if there's issues with how that's functioning. Dysfunction of like the neurology of like the nerves that trigger our gut to like pulsate and move the food along, the bolus of food through our intestines. Antibiotic therapy, I think most people have heard, don't abuse antibiotics. Dysfunctional immune system, food poisoning, and then just some additional potential causes, kind of a summary of other possible triggers at the end. So low stomach acidity. So this one's, I see so much when I do stool tests, see like high H. pylori, which usually is an indicator of high stomach acid. One of the biggest things that lowers stomach acidity is chronic stress, which, none of us are immune to that, unfortunately. But when we're chronically stressed, it stimulates our sympathetic nervous system, which is like fight or flight. And we're not stimulating that parasympathetic, like rest, digest portion of our nervous system as much as we should. And so because it's kind of like controls heart rate and digestion, if you've ever heard of vagal nerve stimulation, that's a big piece of our parasympathetic nervous system. It's just, we don't, like, digestion gets put on the back burner for kind of like just stress all the time, or, eating in our car, rushing everywhere. And it's hard in our modern world to not live like that. It's something I'm constantly trying to work on myself. But yeah, our body's like not, it's firing the other part of our nervous system. And so it's not being told like, focus on eating, release enough stomach acid to break down like the proteins coming in, and don't trigger, enzyme release or enough, because it's just, you're telling it a different message. So chronic stress can lower it. A higher level of carbohydrates and not enough protein, because it's mainly used on a digestive level to break down protein. So if you're not getting enough protein, that will also affect the amounts being released as well. So without adequate stomach acid, it's kind of like really the second phase of digestion. We start breaking down some foods with our saliva, but then the next step would be at the level of the stomach. So foods won't be broken down as sufficiently. So then undigested larger carbohydrate molecules can go onto the small bowel, and the bacteria can kind of thrive on those and proliferate, multiply, which kind of have a heyday, just have these bigger carbohydrate pieces, starches coming in. And it's just like I always say, it's like yeast in bread. When you put some sugar in bread, it has that leavening effect, because these microbes thrive on sugars and starches. So it's kind of like miracle grow, I say. Not that you shouldn't eat starches, I'm not saying that, but just they take longer to be broken down, and then the bacteria just kind of thrive and start multiplying, feeding on them, and produce gas as a byproduct and other issues. Stomach acid also suppresses pathogens coming in through food, our food sources. There's microscopic levels, I remember learning when I went to college, on our foods of, bacteria, just whether you're at a picnic or not and foods are sitting out. I mean, there's, by like food law, they can have certain amounts in packaged products and still be legal. So it plays a big role in killing off pathogens coming in, so they don't get into our small bowel and lead to SIBO, or like pathogens, norovirus and things coming in, or just different types of pathogens that should not normally reside in our gut. And the stool test does test for pathogens and stuff too. So just have a more basic pH. Let's see. So as a byproduct of carbohydrate digestion, yeah, hydrogen and methane gases specifically, and there's a SIBO test I have some people do that measures their gas levels of those to see what kind of SIBO they have going on. Those gases will be produced, increasing pressure in the abdomen, and that can lead to like acid reflux. So I have kind of a big issue with how the clinical world addresses acid reflux and GERD. We just suppress the acid with proton pump inhibitors and H2 blockers, and kind of make the problem worse, when really it's usually gas escaping and trying to push the acid that's just there up when it's trying to get out. So it's usually, yeah, we're kind of making the problem worse by just like putting a Band-Aid on it and suppressing the acid more. So I guess I kind of just alluded to that. What the first point says. Let's see, other factors that can lead to low stomach acid: antacids, obviously, stress, yep, inflammatory foods, nutrient deficiencies, mostly like on a protein level, like I said, is needed to cue the system to produce adequate acid, and H. pylori infection. So I just kind of have a connection beneath there, how it typically plays out for people. So low stomach acid by one of those triggers will lead to reflux or heartburn, like with the fermentation and gas trying to escape, pushing just acid that's in the stomach up. Most people actually are low for stomach acid that I test. So then we take an acid suppressing drug to get rid of the GERD or the reflux, and then low acidity in the stomach increases the likelihood of H. pylori developing or multiplying to a level it's not safe. A small amount of H. pylori is okay, it's just when it gets too high. And then H. pylori actually further increases the pH or makes our environment less acidic, more basic in our stomach. And so it just like, as you can see, it's kind of just like a continuation of kind of perfect storm. And then, we get more bacteria, more fermentation, more gas trying to escape, and we keep suppressing it with the medication, and it's just a vicious cycle. So we need to get at, looking at the gut, what's causing all this fermentation and gas to be produced, and work backwards. And maybe in the meantime, keep a PPI or H2 blocker on board. Obviously, we don't want to damage the esophagus, but chronically taking them is not the answer, I guess. So anyway, but that one main point here, getting back to main focus, yes, stomach acidity is going pathogens through into the small bowel, and commonly lead to SIBO. Altered bioflow and enzyme production. So both required for adequate digestion of the foods we eat. So pretty much here, just if they're not adequately being produced, foods are going to be digested adequately and sit there longer in the small bowel and have more time to be fermented. And then again, that multiplication of the bacteria, and just, more gas production, more water maybe being pulled in to the gut, and diarrhea and reflux, right? Like I talked about, all those IBS symptoms developing, just, I call it, reduced digestive capacity or maldigestion. So the stress, it kind of bleeds into these other ones. It can really affect low stomach acid and stuff, but stress interferes with many aspects. So yes, produces less stomach acid. And then that's kind of a domino effect. So when our body has food come down the chute, as I say, it gets the stomach, it should be triggered to release stomach acid, and then that should send a message to our pancreas and our gallbladder. Okay, we need to be ready. Let's pump out some bile. Let's pump out some digestive enzymes. So if the stomach acidity isn't adequate, we're not going to release enough bile and enzymes because the message won't be sent or as strongly to those organs, that there's food coming down the chute, because the high acid level, the low pH, is what triggers that. So then we have lowered bile and enzyme production, both of which we just learned can contribute to SIBO on their own. It can also obviously weaken our immune system, chronic stress, so allows for overgrowth of bad bacteria or infection even in the gut. On any level, a suppressed immune system just can't obviously control those things as well. And it interferes with gut motility, so slows the movement of foods. And it's really just getting back to that, stimulating more the sympathetic nervous system. So it really just slows down all digestive processes. When we're chronically stressed, we don't digest things as well. So like the peristalsis, which is the movement, contractions of food through our bowels, is not going to be triggered as, consistently as it should be. Migrating motor complex dysfunction. So if our gut is healthy, the MC is a pattern of gut like wave-like movements, of those finger-like projections that in a fasted state, our body should be, it kind of initiates those to like, okay, we're not eating, it's time to clear out the food debris. Whenever we eat, that stops. So like when people have gut issues, I really encourage like try to eat 2 to 3 heavy meals and not be grazing all day, because you're just kind of like, it's like just always providing fertilizer for the bacteria in the gut, and not giving your gut time to rest and push that food debris out. So it's constantly has stuff to just kind of nibble on. If the MMC function is impaired, yes, the bacteria aren't going to be cleared as efficiently, increasing the likelihood of SIBO. So different things can impair MMC function. Low thyroid actually can just, it slows down all, kind of chemical processes, our whole metabolism. Different medications, inflammatory bowel issues, diabetes, just different things are connecting to affecting the migrating motor complex dysfunction. Dysfunction of intestinal nerves or muscles. So just different, neurological disease states, I guess I would say, they're connecting. So obviously just we have impairment of how our nerves fire. It's going to affect this here. We're talking more about the peristalsis, the contractions of the bowels moving food through. It's going to be delayed, obviously, logically. It's slowed down if we have neurological issues. You know, Parkinson's and things like that can start to affect it. And so, you know, obviously that's a much more complex issue. I just want to mention that's something that people can start to develop SIBO logically if the gut-like contractions aren't happening as efficiently as they should due to neurological firings not working as well. I think that's would be the main things to say there. Yep, just slows it from moving from the small bowel into that large bowel and excreting it. Antibiotic therapy, so kind of initially you think like, well, it should, you know, help with SIBO. And there are antibiotics specifically that I recommend prescribed for SIBO. It's a pretty last resort option in my mind, just because they're so aggressive. But some people do need that, and the herbal antimicrobials might not be enough that I would typically use, but typically they are. But even though SIBO is a chronic bacterial overgrowth that sometimes is treated with antibiotics, the dysbiotic effects of antibiotics can also cause it. So systemic exposure to antibiotics directly, like taking them for 10 days or so, or antibiotic, they're even finding treated livestock kills both harmful and helpful bacteria and can just throw off the balance in our microbiome. So if too many protected bacteria are killed, it's kind of like a war going on always. The good guys are trying to keep the more pathogenic strains in balance. So if the antibiotic kills off too many of the good guys, the bad guys, I'll say, can kind of start to proliferate and multiply quickly and lead to SIBO. So, and it also, again, is going to kind of suppress our immune response to kind of regulate that. So again, they're definitely needed in certain situations, most definitely, but just want to be really careful and only use them, in my opinion, when they're, you know, absolutely necessary, and make sure we're doing what we can through, you know, vitamins A, C, and E, and zinc and turmeric to help support our immune response. So we're not just killing, but we're also supporting our immune response when we do that, and then follow it up with a good probiotic. Dysfunctional immune system. So the foundation of our gut microbiome is built in early infancy. So again, I'm not saying, you know, anyone's wrong for having a C-section or, you know, is bottle fed. Obviously, there's so many different situations, but, and many of you maybe have heard this, but there have found, you know, I guess proven that children born via C-section don't get the good like microbe exposure going through, you know, the vaginal canal, and if they're bottle fed versus breastfed, just don't get natural probiotics. And just, I heard a crazy fact, maybe you've heard this too, like somehow the mother, it's supposed to be able, like through the baby's saliva when they nurse, pick up like what they're fighting and produce the antibodies to fight that, and really, you know, release them through their milk and stuff. So it's just crazy how our bodies are designed. It's pretty impressive. You know, that can just lead to a more weakened immune system maybe from the start. Obviously, there's plenty of things you can do to strengthen an immune system and support gut health if a baby is born C-section and bottle fed, most definitely. Additionally, just other, you know, conditions of immune deficiency, HIV and AIDS, immunoglobulin deficiency. I'll point that one out. We can measure that on the stool test, and different autoimmune conditions can predispose people to SIBO. Okay. Food poisoning. I want to get to the stool test, so I will just kind of breeze through this one. It is a common trigger for SIBO. It greatly can impair that migrating motor complex. You know, we do the best we can to avoid it, but probably most of us on the call today, you know, have had some level of food poisoning. But the last sentence there kind of shocking. One occurrence of gastroenteritis may increase the chances of developing IBS or SIBO sixfold, they found. So when we have food poisoning, certain cells in our intestine that play a role in the migrating motor complex apparently look very similar to the toxin, and our body's immune system trying to protect us can attack these cells and damage that migrating motor complex. So that's in general how it can then, you know, food debris is not getting moved along as efficiently, and it can lead to the multiplication of bacteria because foods are sitting there longer and they, again, are just kind of thriving on it, feeding on it. And I'm happy to share these slides too, if you guys want to look at them more closely. And so this is the last main slide before I show a sample stool test. There are many other health concerns in general, it's saying, as risk factors are looking into for SIBO, such as carbohydrate intolerance. That's just a big one because that's what microbes feed on. So if you're just not breaking them down properly and efficiently due to whatever reason, that commonly will lead to bacterial multiplication because they just thrive on that. The location we live in, leaky gut. And another point I want to point out here, they're trying to see if it's like chicken before the egg or egg before the chicken. So certain conditions seem to particularly be associated with SIBO, such as IBS, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, and celiac. It's unclear as to whether these conditions predispose people or SIBO is playing a larger role in the pathogenesis of like causing inflammatory bowel disorders like Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. I can definitely see with what I know, like how it could go one way and the other way. And so I think that's very possible and probable that it can kind of go both ways. So definitely I see a lot of autoimmune conditions and systemic inflammation like Hashimoto's, an immune attack on the thyroid. I see that strongly being triggered by leaky gut and like sensitivities then to gluten and stuff, triggering and kind of like pouring gasoline on our immune system and causing those thyroid antibodies to go higher. So whenever someone has an autoimmune condition, I always want to look at their gut and see if that's a trigger for their immune imbalance. But that most definitely I see a lot. All right, so got like 1 to 2 minutes before, well, now it is 12. So if you have to get off, that's totally fine. I'm just going to briefly go through a stool test. So if you have the time, you can stay on for about 2-3 more minutes. So this is a pretty common test used in, I guess, the functional world, pretty well known, shows a lot of information. So it's going to show our whole gut microbiome, enzyme levels, inflammatory levels, if we have leaky gut going on, and I'll just scan through it here. So first it's going to look at pathogens, bacterial, parasitic, and viral. And these are ones that shouldn't be present in our gut. They're coming through exogenous sources like contaminated water sources or food sources. So we, I don't say maybe need to be a little bit more aggressive with treating them, but there's a lot of things to do. It just depends which one is present. H. pylori, about 50% of adults have H. pylori. It's just when it'll turn red when the result gets too high. When it gets above that cutoff, then we need to start trying to, work on its stomach acidity, or taking herbals that can help deplete the high levels of H. pylori and, probably lower carbohydrate diet, things like that. So it's not getting tons of sugars and starches to feed on. Anyways, so H. pylori, commensal keystone bacteria. So these guys really affect our immune response. So I've seen them very low, and also when they're high, that's indicative of SIBO. Commensals, these really thrive on fiber and polyphenols. So a lot of colorful produce. They're rich in polyphenols, and lots of plant-based foods with fiber is what they need to survive. Opportunistic overgrowth microbes. So these are, as you can see by the titles, more autoimmune related and inflammatory. So usually these are high if we've got like Hashimoto's or some type of autoimmune condition going on. They don't necessarily trigger IBS symptoms. So I have had a lot of people say like, we don't need to look at my gut because I have normal bowel movements and I'm not bloated, but I've had so many people with leaky gut and high inflammatory strains who, would never know they have any gut issues because they don't have the IBS, but that doesn't mean you don't have high strains that trigger more inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. So looks at candida, different strains of yeast. So that Candida albicans is the most common trigger of the candida and the oral thrush and yeast infections that I mentioned. It looks at viruses, but these are more systemic. So only for like doing an antiviral protocol would these show up in the stool. So I don't run this test if I think someone has like reactivated Epstein-Barr going on, which they're seeing a lot with COVID long haulers. It's reactivating like dormant viruses like Epstein-Barr that causes mono and stuff. but I would do a blood test for that, not a stool test. But parasites, if there's any parasites in the gut, which they're actually pretty common. And then the intestinal health markers. So calprotectin and eosinophil activation proteins are main inflammatory markers. So we can look at the inflammation levels in the gut. The secretory IgA is our frontline immune response in the gut. So with people with autoimmune conditions or a lot of inflammatory issues, a lot of times that's sky high. And people like with chronic stress, like depleted adrenals, I'll say it can be really, really low. So there's things we can do to support that, but a lot of like working on lifestyle modification is huge too. Anti-gliadin is going to look at if you have a food sensitivity to gluten. Gliadin is a main form of gluten. Do we have any blood in the stool? Steatocrit is the fattiness of the stool, so it's going to look at if you have adequate bile production, and then elastase is a main pancreatic enzyme. And then this zonulin is a protein that breaks down our gut those tight junctions. So if that's high, we have leaky gut going on. I don't do the stool gluten peptide. That's more, it's a follow-up test if somebody has let this one go high. And I've had people say, it's in the red, and I've been gluten-free for a decade. We test to see if it's slipping in anywhere. And if not, like proteins and oats is a common trigger for that antibody or immunoglobulin. So anyways, I rarely do that one. If you're wondering what that is, I don't typically add on that one for an additional cost. But so yeah, I just wanted to show like kind of I feel like brings together a lot of things I mentioned verbally. And if you have gut issues, I'd be happy to explain it more, but I think it just kind of pulls a lot of things together. So so it's kind of like we need to look at all the bugs in there, good and bad, the microbiome, and then look at inflammation and how tightly sealed our gut is, and then the digestive capacity, the enzymes, the bile and stomach acid, those juices. So I will stop there. I do have about 5 minutes if anyone has any questions. I'm not sure if anyone's still on or not, but I think that's about everything I had to cover.
Thanks, Katelyn. There are some people on, so if anyone has a quick question, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it, or definitely you can type in the chat if you don't have a microphone. I guess I'll ask just one question, Katelyn. If there's one, you gave us a lot of information and things to look at. If there's like one overarching thing you always tell your clients, like number one, let's try this for a little while. Is there anything that is more common that is it just like focus on whole foods for a little bit, or
Yeah. Just basic steps. Yeah. Excuse me. So typically, I'm glad you asked this. With IBS symptoms, if it is SIBO, we do like a low FODMAP diet. And so what is that? It's like low fermentable carb and starch sources. So if you Google, go to Google Images or whatever, go to a link and type in low FODMAP, it's low like fructose, fructans, galactans, like broccoli is really rich in fructans, and like the Brussels sprouts, right? Ones where, we know they're gas forming. Garlic, onions, apples are really high in fructose and fructans and can cause a lot of gas for people. They're just harder carb sources to break down, and so they can sit there longer and, be thrived on by microbes. So before I started doing the stool test, I just kind of had people track symptoms, like on a Bristol stool chart, their stools, to see how that was affected by what they ate. They obviously track their food, and then track like gas and bloating. Like after lunch, I got really gassy or something. And usually it was most times 9 out of 10 it was high FODMAP food. So we would pursue a low FODMAP diet for about 8 weeks or so, and then usually like that's the starve phase, and I add some antimicrobial herbal. But you could reach out for that, but you could just start with a low FODMAP diet, and they feel immediately better if it is SIBO, because you're starving them of their main food source. And try to not go too heavy carb, because they can still thrive on, like, rice is low FODMAP, but it's starch. So just try to be cognizant of starch intake. And yeah, that'd be a place to start to feel better and at least see, does that make a change? And then maybe if it's candida or something, you wouldn't, and then you'd want to pursue a stool test. But usually we need to go into like a kill phase and add like some antimicrobials, berberine, garlic, things like that that can be a little bit more aggressive and kill off strains. Because sometimes people will say, I'll just stick with low FODMAP, I feel better, but that can starve off like good bacteria too. And so you don't want to do that the rest of your life. So it needs to be temporary. So if you do that for 8 weeks, start to reintroduce FODMAP foods, and you start getting symptoms again, then you'd want to add on some like herbal antimicrobials. But if it's a small enough case, just low FODMAP for about 2 months can starve it off enough, and people reintroduce and they feel fine. So it really just depends on the level of overgrowth.
Awesome. Anyone else have questions before we let her go? Really good information. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's more common than most of us want to admit that we all
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
equate with some of these symptoms. So
Yeah, even like, I have my own issues to work on, but like obviously I eat pretty darn healthy, and pregnancy can really throw off your gut microbiome. And so after having Kira, who just turned 2 now, my second one, I started having a lot of these symptoms I noticed higher FODMAP food. So I kind of put myself through my protocol and took care of it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just saying a lot of things can trigger it. And we're not so immune to stress. And so common to have the low stomach acid, and you might eat super healthy, but stuff's going to slip through, the pathogens and stuff, extra microbes. And so it just, so many things can cause it, like we went through today. So it's hard to avoid sometimes.
awesome. Okay, well, I don't see anything in the chat, and no one has jumped on for a question. So thank you so much for presenting
Yeah.
for us today. And I'm sure if anyone has questions, we can probably reach out to you and get
Yeah,
some
my
clarity.
last slide just had my contact info again, but
Mhm.
website is KatelynNicholson.com. And then, yeah, my email's there, knicholsonrdld@gmail.com. Happy to do discovery call and talk through your symptoms with you and stuff and give you my thoughts. And then you can decide if you want to pursue that. So
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Katelyn.
thank you.
With
Have a good
you.
day.
Thank you guys all for joining.